we're just going to be doing an audio. It was raining today. Every time my son is off for 2 days, my entire momentum and focus shifts, especially if he's working on things local. And all of a sudden my momentum is just stripped away and I'm starting over. But that's actually a good thing because you can fully repair when you take 2 or 3 days off. I'm not going to say that HIIT training and high intensity training is 100% valid. I think it really depends on a lot of things. Like, I think Dorian Yates training with Mike Mentzer really opened his eyes to increasing the resistance and the reps. And realizing that once you do that, you're bypassing the total volume required, but that the volume is still necessary on some level. Now, from a natural training perspective, you have to go up to certain bases, brackets of body weight, and deal with a natural composition that over time you refine and you get more comfortable with. So you'll admit that if you gained 20 pounds by eating a bunch of junk food and laying around, which earlier this year I gained 45. Yeah, I gained about 45 pounds. It was probably about 32 to 37 pounds straight through. No training, no nothing, just complete and total fatigue. And that is invariably what you'll be left with when you overly focus on the carnivore. The carnivore is it's not a long-term diet nutrition plan. At least if you assume that equilibrium, right, homeostasis is your goal, you have to really ask yourself if you think that enduring stress and adapting to stress is, in fact, homeostasis. Because it's not. Homeostasis occurs when your body is acceptant in balance with energy in, energy out, where all processes are able to get equal amounts of nourishment. And that means your brain is functionally able to get glucose through glycolysis, which is about 66% of what your brain fuels from. Now, there have been a lot of studies that support ketones, brain function, but you'd have to put yourself through it. There's only one way to find out, and that's to do it, and that's to stay on it for over a year, which I did. I have nothing bad to say about ketosis or gluconeogenesis, but they're extreme states, and your body will never be able to exist in a society that is fueled off of quick carbohydrates and caffeine, among other substances that aren't discussed, that run the trucking industry. The supply chain isn't supported solely from what you see before you as the prevalent American way of life. So I'm trying to make up for some, I'm not going to say a lapse in blood flow, but I've got to keep the blood flow redistributing calories to their proper places. So we're going to start it on a walk. And we're going to see if that walk can turn into something a little more intense. I'm just not feeling like punishing myself with intensity today. I don't really feel like lifting. And on days like that, even if the schedule says you got to lift, I'll skip it. The first thing you need to do, and this is why people that are doing PEDs just keep progressing, is because naturally your neurohormones go through these dips and troughs, peaks, and you have to, it's your job to time your meals out, to time your training out, to time out your hydration. And when you're off a little bit, you're going to take more time off than you think is required. In fact, if I were working a job like I should be, I would be, getting 3 days of training on a good week and 2 days of stable training where I try to time it out and just get in there and do the best I can. And that's reality. And when you do that for 6 months to a year, the better part of a year, typically, you're going to see results, especially if you're focused on one particular modality. So I remember realizing that I had to reduce everything. Working 40, 50 hours a week, I had to reduce everything. In other words, I had to reduce the number of sets and increase the intensity. So when I was about 26 years old, I decided I'm doing nothing but bench press, bent over rows. Even though I loved incline presses, I typically chose incline presses over any other. I wanted the most basic exercise, and I was going to follow the specific perfecting of that, the art, right? I did the same thing with bent over rows, heavy bent over rows, low reps, anywhere between 3 and 6 reps typically, and squats. And then I would add in military presses, but oftentimes it created too much compound stress on my shoulder joint and messed with my bench press. So I decided that I would intermittently involve shoulder press, but I would focus on the progress of my bench press that would determine whether or not I felt like I could handle some shoulder presses. So I started just focusing on reps with shoulder presses, and eventually I was able to do those 4 exercises. And wouldn't you know it, I got up to 210 pounds of really lean, beefy muscle mass, where I had the power to bench 360, and it was a good platform. And then later, I would, several times I would eclipse that. At 180 pounds, when I was about 31, 32 years old, I eclipsed that by an enormous amount with no PEDs, nothing. What I was doing at that time, though, is I was doing Tribulus Tribex. I think it was called Tribex. But I was doing a couple other things. I was doing from proteinfactory.com. I've talked about this before. I was doing this BioSerum, I think is what it's called. It was just basically dehydrated beef liver, right? Desiccated beef blood, beef liver. It's basically the most terrible tasting stuff. If you left it out for a day and it got hot, it smelled like you had a dead carcass. It smelled like there was like a rat carcass. And that stuff really through training into high gear. And then there was a product at that time called Aminogen that could be added in as an enzyme, assistive enzyme to quickly digest very high quality bioavailable protein powders. And there were a few really glorious times in natural training where if I would have been able to have more resources and more time, just like a few months extra. So that's what I'm treating this as. My kids are going with my terrible mother and my terrible ex-wife off to Hawaii. I've watched people, terrible narcissists. It cracks me up that, I'm watching this show. I'm not going to get into it. I don't want to degrade anyone. That's not my aim on any of my channels. It's not my aim. And I like to do these lives where I got it on horizontal mode. It's not pushed the same way as other live streams. So oftentimes I'll get 0 people tuning in. And I like to be able to go live and record this as a live event. Talk about things that maybe seem abstract, like something that's been on my mind. I just completed Mr. Robot. I did skip like 2 or 3 episodes that I felt were, at the time I felt they were counterproductive to the show. But as I see how the finalization of the show, you could say it's very deep and complex, but it's the world you live in every single day, right? Because what Elliot, the main character, is faced with is that he is not the main character. He's actually the mastermind, the one that's using all the resources and availability in order to keep himself safe or feeling safe and secure, and to look past his inadequacies and idiosyncrasies. That the true Elliot, which you never see. So the sister at the very end, the sister acknowledges Elliot, like, there you are, like he's back. So he goes through, he's got DID, so he's displaced, he's got all these multiple personalities, and he's not himself. So his abusive father, his abusive mother, who were both passed away for the long, so he never got closure. His subconscious is working through the problem, right, of taking them through reenacted trauma. But through it all, he had to be the hero. So it's kind of like Joseph Campbell, right? The whole hero's journey. The mastermind, realized that Elliot had to become the hero that's going to save the world. So the whole thing's based on him being a master computer hacker and really taking the whole concept of Fight Club onto a whole nother level, where he actually takes on and reduces Evil Corp, E-Corp, and the Dark Army, which is never said, but it basically is China. And it's the factions of the CCP and the Manchurian candidates and the brainwashing and the fractionated personalities that come from that. Because the main character that's played as so you have the protagonist, but there are too many antagonists, right? But this is his main opponent, and that is this leader that's not transsexual, but transgender. He dresses as a fully developed female. He was fractionated because through this sort of MSS implied programming model, he lost his love, the man that he was in love with. Right when he was revealing that his true self was like a woman. It's a very strange thing. Like, not strange in the respect of judging on people in that sense, but strange in the compartmentalization and the various personalities and how they interact with one another. Because near the end, the last 3 episodes, there's this meltdown at this nuclear power plant where he stops the inevitable meltdown that would kill all these people in this town, but thinks that he is dead and he's gone on to another place, right? Only to find that he was in a protected room, and that the final stalemate of self-discovery, this antagonistic character, the sort of dark army Chinese leader, remits and supplicates and finds it more important that Elliot find his way through his personality disorders. It's almost like the antagonistic character saying, well, you know what? I'm trying to take down the world and so forth, and I'm transgender, but you're so fractured that I can't even count the number of personalities. So finally, near the end, Elliot's mastermind personality takes a back seat and sits in the movie theater and basically is watching through the eyes of what Elliot would do next, all these different personas and personalities. And the thing is that I talk about this type of thing quite often. You know, I talk about the fact that we are all really derivatives of a central persona, and that this entire world is a ruse or a setup based on the zodiac, but even more so when we look at the Myers-Briggs Keirsey temperament sorters, really disorders, where you're looking at each person like I am actually a mastermind, an INTJ, right? So that mastermind personality exists is along with the guardian, right? And this hero, right? Where these personalities, again, are disparately separated, trying to find unification. And through our actual world, reality is what it is real, Israel, Isis, Ray, sunlight, right? El, God. What we find is that we are just derivatives to a master code, trying to express authentic identification. And when we falsely do this, we are rewarded. But when we continue to search for truth, and we continue to try and develop, we essentially are making a statement that we're taking on this this master persona, right? That I believe is trying to hack into, if you were to think like God, what would that look like, right? So you would take one sphere of totality and try to figure out a symbol of harmony or a monad of harmony. And it doesn't mean that, so harmony doesn't imply that there isn't a parasitic atmosphere. You know, you have symbiote organisms that could live off the carcasses and the destruction of a particular host, but evolution and all sorts of other energetic tiers, substrates, divisions are occurring as well at the same time, right? So what we like to see as a master morality is really a slave morality. And so when you get into this type of thinking, it becomes very complex for the human organism, the human host, right? Because we don't have that type of ability or hardware to endure that sort of stress. And so you could say that that's why we exist, is that the integer or the amalgamation of these complex symbols, that they would indeed have to be reduced to integer or symbol, down to their base root of meaning, right? Of bit information. So when you look at nature, that's really what's happening, right? There's always this complex chain of amino acids, and then it's almost better correlated to motor neuron functioning, right? You have this complex series of motor neurons, and then finally, when you master a movement, particularly in the line of force, you require less motor neuron innervation, right? Less energy. It's more directed, right? So it really, even more than the amino acid or the symbol, it's exactly the precise point to where that symbol is placed. And this gets back into zodiacal uniform geometry, right? If we were to create the tapestry of God and the bone structure of God, what would that look like, right? So I like putting it out there and doing live streams. Get a little sip of water. But I also like to look at that screen and see that no one is looking. Right? It's a live event. It's there for everyone. It's not occulted. It's just not a favorite of everyone, right? So I saw this weird USC ass-kissing interview with Arnold Schwarzenegger. By the way, Arnold Schwarzenegger, you wouldn't even know his name if he didn't have access to the steroids that he had at the time. You wouldn't know his name if he didn't deny use of steroids. You wouldn't know his name if he didn't skip his father's funeral and his brother died in a car accident in less than 2 years of his father passing away. And it happened to be when Arnold was stepping up and refused to go to his father's funeral, which he bragged about. Do you really think that he didn't get a big, huge chunk of money that he's never talked about? And even more so, his brother's share. All right, so people are sacrificed when you are a narcissist and you step up and you say, yeah, I'll steal the 1980, or was it 81? I think it was 80, Olympia crown from Mike Mentzer. Yeah, sure, Mike Mentzer was a fucked up drug addict. So was Arnold Schwarzenegger. They all were. A dastardly person. And now he's trying to come off as if he has wisdom. You know, talking about Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk, he was not only subsidized, but money laundering took place from a very early age, prior to him even being 18 years old. How can you know at 18 that you are going to be, for the next 13 years, of the far right? Right? I don't really like talking about him. In fact, blocking out all his proselytizing ads over the last 3 months, pushing at me. I took it extremely personally. And I ended up having contempt for him, and that has not abated. As I watch more of his syllogistic, ridiculous pandering to the right? And I'm not of the left, right? I'm not partisan at all. So don't get me wrong here. But I see the full agenda, and it's too information dense to even care about that while I'm walking and trying to enjoy my walk. I've talked about it. It's not me. It's not anything. And so the main issue that's abounding, so my son said, that he actually has friends that are happy, almost celebrating that Charlie Kirk died. Right? And then at first my reaction was, that's not good. And then I realized after I said that I couldn't say it again. I even went to the place where he had said again, man, I wouldn't celebrate it. And it's kind of like, if somebody, like a cat landing on their feet, would stand for such ideologies, no matter what planet, era you put them in, they would be capitalists, just like Arnold Schwarzenegger. They would be capitalists. They would have to be on top. They would take out people that were more worthy, right? More worthy of the prize, more worthy of the station. And they had to be on top. And they would cheat, and they would cut throats, and they would disrespect, and they would talk crap about other people divisively, no matter what. Well, you have a persona of a self-perceived alpha male, right? Who is perpetuated by their own insecurities. And that's what's happening there, is the narcissist is protecting the narcissist. And it's more prevalent today than ever. And, it's ironic that Robert De Niro would hate Trump, because he's the antithetical aspect of Robert De Niro's narcissistic personality disorder, right? He's what Robert De Niro worked vehemently not to see himself as or become, but the truth is, that's him. That's him. He's a narcissist. He hides behind a charade, as do all actors. Why get in front of a bunch of people and be seen a certain way, collect those checks? Just like Johnny Depp and his countless occult, the Ninth Gate I was talking about, so many others. He's first in line to do these occult ritual movies, and then for him to just sort of act like all I am is an actor. An actor of what? A portrayer of what? Sitting in for whom? Right? Giving whom a voice? Right? So it really is about the actionable deeds of what you did, and more so the geometrical alignment that you're allowing, right? That you're giving way to, that you're creating a space for. That's pretty riveting, right? So you look at people like Charlie Kirk, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Johnny Depp. They have created a way for a specific type of narcissist to come on the scene, along with all the others, right? They just wanted to be a persona. They wanted to be respected, no matter how far off the alignment with who they truly were represents. So it kind of gets back into Mr. Robot, right? Where if you are falsely identifying yourself, and you're calling yourself a self, and you're putting yourself above other people, meaning that you're getting to the well first before the people who needed it more, before those who deserved it got there, and that you actually cheated to get to that well, and you used every means possible. That is just like Charlie Kirk, his $80 million backing, right? The fact that he paid for, he busts January 6ers through under Turning Point. Yeah, this shit's all coming out. And that his weird witchcraft wife, right, is going through her indoctrination ceremonies. She is actually perpetuating. I mean, Tucker Carlson setting her up with $1 million, seeding the money. I think there's something like, I heard there's like $12 million already going through her hands. So they're using her as a money laundering venue, a wing and arm. They say the devil works harder. You look at these factions and you supplicate and bow down. You cow down to the persona. But the persona is working against purity. The persona is working against the pure source. The people who put the innocent at risk, the people who offered up the innocent as sacrifice for the greater good when they don't even know what the greater good is. As long as they get what they want, that's the greater good. That is what this entity wants us to stay. It doesn't want us to see ourselves or develop beyond that. Short-sighted rituals of syllogistic mind and thought. 2-bit information. It doesn't even give you an atmosphere to breathe in if you require truth. If you live by way of purity and purification. It doesn't even give you the respect of building and cultivating a home. It takes you out. It doesn't play fair. It keeps energy from you. It keeps education from you. It makes you think that you came up short, while it bolsters the purses of these narcissists. And most of these narcissists don't even know that they are narcissists. It's hilarious. Like when you're sitting there and you're watching something about narcissists and they talk about it, you almost want to belly laugh. The irony. The irony. So how do you know? It's when whatever your mastermind agenda says is going to make you better, is going to fix you, is going to heal you, as opposed to doing this for principle, seeing that universally, cosmically, everywhere, all the time, purity and the pure source is and should be the main, the protagonist's main focus, right? And abolishes the idea of a protagonist or a main character, right? Because it uniformly, collectively brings everything into principle so that you're not just doing it for yourself. That's true evolution. That's what should be happening here. That's what defies the logic of most people. So why do they even exist? Well, their wings, their arms, they're bolstered temporarily. Temporarily. The intelligence doesn't lie with them all the time. Just when it hurts you, they go back to being idiots. They go back to spacing out and dreaming that they're so important. Yeah, it's a pretty sick situation we're in. And many people wouldn't have it any other way.